Hey, good afternoon, coaches. Welcome to today's e-workshop. Today we will have post-season evaluation as our topic. Okay, before we carry on, we have already muted your mic. However, later on, we will have this breakout session whereby we will help you unmute yourself, and then we can have a discussion. And during the main presentation, please, if you have any questions or would like to provide any response, please do so in the Zoom chat box. Right. Okay. So moving on to today's topic, post-season evaluation. So post-season evaluation is a period whereby coaches will conduct a 360-degree evaluation of the effectiveness of their coaching program for the past season. While obtaining this feedback and input from various stakeholders working with them. So today's e-workshop will be presented by Mr. Vincent Ong, who is this experienced coach, physical educator, and also this sports administrator, who has worked with various local sports organizations. So before we proceed with the workshop, okay, in your Zoom, in your Zoom chat box below, please. Okay, because later we have this breakout activity whereby we will group coaches according to 3 categories. First category will be school CCAs. Second category will be clubs, and third category will be national, youth, and senior levels. So could you reply in the chat box, choose one category that you are currently coaching in, as this is where we will group you according for the breakout session later. Yeah, so type away in your Zoom chat box now. Thank you. And also we'll appreciate if everybody could reply. So those who didn't provide a reply, we will assign you to a breakout room randomly. Thank you. Okay, keep the responses coming. We have about, I think, 15 coaches here. Okay, looks like some of you still haven't responded. Please provide a response within the next 30 seconds. Yeah, before we proceed to begin the presentation. Thank you. Okay, please keep to these are 3 choices. So if you have indicated more than one, we will just randomly assign you to either one of those groups. All right, looks like there's no more response. So Vincent, you can take away from here. Vincent, please.
Just give me a moment. Good afternoon, everybody. I know it's quite a difficult time for most coaches because coming out of that period where we have our circuit breaker and a lot of you all have to adapt to it, and some of you are really struggling with having any coaching being done, especially if you're involved in the school program. You're just waiting when is the time, and I think just only recently they managed to allow you to have your training, and some of you are going onto a virtual mode. So today we're going to be talking about post-season evaluation. In other words, right after your national schools competition or your club competitions, you will want to evaluate yourself and your program and how best can you do that. So a lot of what we are doing today will be based on the book Coaching Better Every Season. I don't know whether you're familiar with that book. If you are not, I would really encourage you to read that book, because that book has got a lot of materials that you can use to try and help you. So, like I said today, let me try and move because I can see this video on my left side. Just hang on for a while. So, as I was saying, it's based on this book by Rick Gilbert, Coaching Better Every Season. And you know, CoachSG has come up with a lot of workshops to guide you in terms of where in the season, what kind of skill sets would you need, and they configure that into the workshop. So today we are trying to focus our attention on this part of it, which is the end of the season, right after your main competition. And that's where you want to try and gather all that information to try and better yourself, right? Not only in terms of your coaching, but your program itself. In other words, what you deliver to your athletes. So why is it important in terms of having a post season evaluation? A lot of times we just think that we had a good season, but we're not quite sure because there's nothing really concrete for you to base it on. Yeah, maybe you get feedback from your athletes and so on. But I think in Singapore in particular, we are not really in that culture of getting feedback in a more formal way to try and evaluate your coaching and your program. So I will try and run through the importance of it, and hopefully you'll be more convinced in terms of why there is a need to have this evaluation done. So a lot of time, most successful coaches use evaluation to try and appraise themselves. In other words, what did I do right and wrong? And in terms of making sure that I can improve at every season. So some of the things that they would want to look in terms of their coaching practices and so on is whether or not they manage to model and teach the program's core values. Now, we will run through some of these later on when you do your breakout. We will hear some of these differences, and I will touch on that. You know, a lot of times we forget that schools has a different sort of core values. MOE has a different core values. And even CoachSG, if you are involved in any sort of outside program or with individuals, they would encourage you to adopt the Olympic values. I don't know whether you remember what are the Olympic values, but there are 3 of them. So you ought to at least center on those values. And then you need to check whether you manage to build trust and cohesion within your team training or your coaching program. And how do you know that? You can't know unless you specifically ask them, or through a very simple sort of a questionnaire. You know, did you find yourself connecting better with your teammates and so on? That's what your intent is, and it ought to be. If you recall, one of the key skill sets of a coach is to try and build up the 4 C's. And I'm sure some of you are quite familiar with it. It's not only to build up the competence in terms of the sport skills, but you're looking at building that confidence in your athletes. It's teaching them to be connected in terms of social skills and team building and teamwork and all the values that will help them gel together as a team. And then there is character, which is, again, some coaches are very strong at that. Some coaches are not as strong at that. So you want to know, did they manage to achieve that? So not only in terms of developing athletes' competency and so on. And the more common thing that you all would know is you ultimately would want your athletes to perform at their peak in the competitions there. And that's what your bread and butter is. Right? So most successful coaches would have a customized evaluation system that they will know that of that season, I'm quite comfortable. This is how I'm going to improve if I'm going to continue on with that program, whether it's in school, whether it's in club, or in your national age program, or if you're just a private coach and you want to make sure that you are always in the game, understanding and being updated with the latest coaching practices and so on. So, like I mentioned, a lot of times in Singapore, it is not in the culture. I think they either shy to ask athletes about giving them feedback, or parents. Sometimes they do it more informally through chat and then asking them questions and you roughly understand, is your child enjoying that program and so on. But at least that is a way to try and evaluate your coaching practices and so on. Okay, so today we're going more specifically into how do we do that? How do we actually do a good evaluation? So first of all, we need to understand, what are we trying to evaluate? What is it? Is it that you manage to deliver the skills, that they learned it, that they become more confident in their ability? Is it the character? And is it the values that you hold true in terms of them identifying this is our team value? How do you know they achieve that team value? So you need to first understand, what is it that you want to evaluate? And then the next thing is to understand, if you want to know the answer to that, who do you get the source from? The most obvious one is your athlete, because they are the one that is a direct person that you are imparting the skills there. But on top of that, there are many other stakeholders. Now, we're going to run through some of that. And then when you know these are the people that you want to test, what else are you going to ensure? You need to know that the tools that you use, or the evaluation system that you come up with, should be able to tease that out. Okay? So we're going to touch a little bit on that. And then the last bit is how you then be able to communicate that to your athletes, coming into the post-season, off-season, and then building them up into the new season. Because you want to touch on, that's what you learn from the evaluation. You are quite confident that these are the gaps that you want to try and get better. And I would encourage you, if you have not seen this movie or this series in Netflix, the latest one regarding coaching, is entitled Coach's Playbook. If I'm right, Coach Playbook. So it features quite a number of successful coaches, and they talk about, through that season, how did they manage to be successful. So if you haven't catch that, I do encourage you to go and watch that. So we talked about, we need to find out from different sources to ensure that what we collect in terms of evaluating ourselves or the program is valid. So as you can see, there's got a whole bunch of that. So if I quickly run through some of this, you will see that the athletes is the most obvious one. Some of us won't have the coaching style, but some of those, and I see that there are a few sports school coaches among the participants here. You will have fellow coaches who will be supporting you in your program and so on. You need that. Mentors and peers, so they may be outside of your organization, but they are fellow coaches that you trust and you can get that feedback. In clubs, you have athletic directors. In schools, you have the head of department or the sports CCA teacher in charge. That will be important person to try and get that feedback. Alumni is another one that should not be underestimated, because a lot of time when we get information from athletes, we forget that we should get information from your alumni, because sometimes athletes may not tell you the full truth, might not get the full picture because they're afraid to tell you the honest feedback. They will hold back some of the something that would be a bit negative. But your alumni may not do that. Your alumni is not going to be afraid to speak their mind. So they are useful resource in terms of evaluating your performance and so on. Support staff can come from your sports science team, if you're dealing with a club level or at a national level, sports official, okay, strangely, Wade Gilbert in his book put in terms of sports official, in terms of how officials would perceive your performance as coaches, perhaps in the way you address your protests and so on. So that's good feedback as well. If you want to improve more all round, or in this case, they are saying in terms of a 360 degrees feedback. Opposing coaches as well. If you trust your fellow opposing coach to give you a good feedback, you should try and get that. And so not many, again, would openly allow themselves to be critiqued by an opposing coach. Parents is quite obvious, but it's not as accessible in schools because schools might not want you to interact too much with the parents. They will leave it to the CCA teacher in charge or the head of department. But for clubs, I think you have more access. Private, definitely more access. National program, yes, you will have access. You will probably have conversations with them and so on. Okay, so that's pretty much who are the stakeholders that would need that. So in terms of developing the plan, what are the things that you've got to look out for? So we talked about it in terms of what exactly are you trying to evaluate. So it is for your coaching, you look at the 4 C's, it's quite obvious. Are you really building that competence correctly? Are you building them up to that competition and be able to pick at that competition that you are targeting? That's important. So in schools as well, they would see that not everybody is going to get that top 4 position, but they would depend on you in terms of getting their athletes to be more responsible, to be able to develop the core values that they hold true by MOE. And I'm sure those who are involved in schools should be familiar with what are the core values of MOE, what are the core values of the school, and what are the core values that your team has decided to adopt. And for that season, they want to follow that sort of value. So those are the things that you want to try and evaluate. And like we mentioned before, who are the ones that you rightfully want to get information from? Again, I said a lot of times we just depend on the athletes and not so much on the other bubbles that I've shared earlier. So it's important for you to try and think through. Should you get a fuller picture? Sometimes athletes might not open up to you, but their parents might help you give a better picture. They are frightened of you. Really, you got to tone down a little bit. They are afraid to say what they mean, or they are really afraid to tell you or communicate openly to you. So it is important that you check with other sources like the alumni or the parents and so on. And in that short time, there are 2 sort of evaluation information that you want. So one of which they would say as a formative. That was that season. You might want to quickly get some of this feedback that will help you improve as you are going along. And you don't want to wait to the end of the postseason to get that feedback. So those are formative evaluation that's important. You just want to make sure, are they getting what you hope to achieve through that season? Okay, so you don't want to wait to the end, and usually those are formative in terms of evaluation. At the end, it tends to be more summative. In other words, at the end of it, it helps you improve for the next season. So there's variations of that. So bear in mind that it is good to have something that you want immediate, to know that everything is in order and is on target. So all these will help you not only evaluate yourself in terms of your coaching practices and your coaching in general, but also your program. Program meaning either your individual one of what you are dealing with your individual athletes, or school program, or club program, or academy program, and so on. Right? John Wooden is being mentioned quite a lot of time because obviously he's one of the most successful American coaches, basketball coaches, and he himself is quoted saying, without proper self-evaluation, failure is inevitable. And a lot of times we do that. We don't know whether what we're doing is right. So it is important for us to keep learning how to evaluate our own coaching practices. So what are the things that we should be evaluating on? So these are some of the things that we can look at, and it was mentioned in the book, systems in terms of what different organization that you are dealing with would have and how they would see your performance. Philosophy, not only in terms of your own coaching philosophy, but the organizational philosophy. In other words, what they believe would be a success. So for a certain school or organization, they may see success as building up for future success. And that's typically what you would expect from a national youth program in schools. Not all schools are going to be thinking, oh, you've got to be a national top 4. They may be expecting you to be good role model to the athletes, that they develop into good students, and you will get feedback from the teachers saying that, wow, they are becoming more responsible in the class and so on, and those are important. Differences in philosophy as well in schools. The importance of not only sports success, what other success would hold true for schools? Academic progress. So for coaches, they've got to be mindful. If you are school coaches, you will be subjected to the fact that you've got to be aware of your athletes' progress in the academic field, right? So those are important. Statistics, I think, is more common to most coaches here, that they use these to try and look at the performance all through the season, how well they perform. So in this case, this is more ice hockey, I believe, in terms of penalty kills, percentages, and all that. So you have a lot of this similar sort of statistics that will help you. Personnels, when you use it in terms of evaluating your own group of people that's helping you, either the sports science team or your fellow coaches, then you want to look at some of these areas there. Practices as well, in terms of what you have developed in terms of your coaching practices, session after session, whether it does pan out in terms of the outcomes that you want. Was the time right? Did you manage to get that length for each of that segments in your practices right? What were the positives out of it, and what were the negatives out of that? So there are many things that you can come out based on each of these categories. So I'm going to run through a few more. Road trips. In America, there's a lot of this because it's a big country, so a lot of their schools program or club program will need them to travel from state to state or different counties and so on. So in Singapore, you might have situations where you travel overseas to have some friendly competitions or just training trips, right? So you will get to have feedbacks from there. Did it achieve the outcomes that you want, either in preparation for your next season and so on? And sometimes you're involved in fundraising, alumni relations. Locker room environment is another common evaluation that we tend to overlook. So maybe we don't have to use the word locker room, but what happens when they are all together, they are about to prepare themselves, and there is a whole culture by itself, in the sense that what's happening? Is it dominated by somebody among that team, who tend to show more negative or more rebellious sort of nature that might affect your team culture, right? And as I mentioned earlier, in terms of academic commitment and performance is important at school level, and this is true even at a collegiate level in the US, because a lot of them have to fulfill that part of it, or else you'll be out of their sports system. So very similar to us. So let's talk a little bit more about the tools and what sort of tools that we want to use. So this is a typical example, in the sense that you may want to just put up a questionnaire and give it to your athletes, and then ask them about the program and evaluate that. So they will just give you a feedback right there, and you then look through and then talk about or clarify with them if you need to, in terms of what is right and wrong and why did they state that way, because these are your athletes. You put that out for your athletes. So this is a typical tool that you can use. So there are many of that as a resource. So if you are trying to deal with different stakeholders in that bubble that I've earlier showed, you'll be scratching your head in terms of what sort of a question should I be asking. So do just loan the book out with Gilbert's coaching better every season, because there won't be time to try and look at all of them. But he has got a whole resource of what typically will be the questions you want to ask, so that that helps you better understand your coaching performance. Okay, I hope I'm not going too fast, but I'm trying to keep to that half an hour before you get into that breakout. So here we talk about having that balance. So sometimes we don't have to have an extensive use of that tool, all right? And all the things that we want to consider, maybe it's more straightforward. But what is key is, what is that question that you want to try and ask in terms of your athlete performance, your athlete development, the trust and cohesion question. Did they adopt and did they manage to learn and develop those values that you want them? Are these the questions that you want? So you need to then ask yourself what kind of information, the extent of what you want to ask, and so on. So it's got to be more practical. Okay, so I hope you have a gist of what is important with this, because the next segment of it will be more of going into the breakouts based on the three contexts that we are looking at. So I know some of you all might be out of this tree, so sorry about that. So possibly those who are more private coaches, and you'll be wondering, I'm dealing with individuals, and you normally have a touch point between athletes and the parents who pays you. So maybe you might just get more information from the school program, and that helps you to get a more wider perspective. So Chuan Leong is going to help me break you all into that three groups. And what was going to happen is that you are going to have an opportunity to discuss with fellow coaches there, to talk about some of the things that I've shared in terms of what is it that we want to evaluate, who is it that we want to get this evaluation from, and what kind of tools do we want to use to try and ask that. Is it more informal and then you try and remember those points, or a more formal way? Could you please complete this questionnaire that I prepared and is really customized by you, and then they will return it back to you, and that feedback is important. So what are the sort of differences? What I want is not for you to talk too deeply into the finer points of that again. I want to get that discussion going in terms of, if you are school CCA program coaches, who are your stakeholders? And then what are the questions you want to ask? Compare that to somebody who is in club. Are there more stakeholders or less stakeholders? And then for the ones who are grouped in the national youth program or the senior program, what is it that is going to be different? I would expect the one in the national program, you've got a lot more stakeholders who are going to be expecting answers. So they are clearly those people that you want to get your evaluation from. Okay, so I hope the discussion will be there, and my fellow colleagues from CoachSG will be helping to facilitate that. At the end of it, we will all come back again to the main group, and I will get hopefully one representative from the group to try and share what are the key differences. Okay, and then I'll sum it up for the main group. Chuan Leong?
Okay, thanks, Vincent. So, okay, for the three groups, the school CCA group will remain in the main room, whereas the club, under the club category, those coaches will go into breakout room 1. Let me see, breakout room 1. Sorry, breakout room 2, whereas the national coaches will go to breakout room 1. So I'll be assigning the groups, you all to into respective groups right now. So do give me a bit of time.
Maybe before you break out, you can take a snap if you are not sure what you'll be discussing on. Snap this slide so that you know the conversation will be around this context. Just give Chuan Leong a moment for him to sort out and put you all into your breakout room.
Okay. All right, coaches, you all should have been assigned to your various groups. Yep. So if you're into your breakout rooms, you all can start discussing. So for the main group will be the school CCA coaches, which Vincent and myself will facilitate.
Now, Chuan Leong, don't forget the facilitator are still in the main room.
Huh? Still in the main room?
Yeah, I think Louis and Yongju are still.
Really?
Yeah, I can see them. Yeah.
Yeah, but strange, I see them. It's already listed under breakout rooms 1 and 2 already.
Yeah, I'm going to stop sharing so that I can see.
Open all rooms. Oh, open all rooms. I didn't open the room just now. Okay, I think they are going into their respective rooms already.
Okay, so can start. So this group will be the ones involved with the school program, right?
Yes, correct.
Yeah. Okay. So maybe I will just start off first before Chuan Leong continues on. So what do you think will be typically the sort of questions that you will need to ask if you're involved in the CCA program? I'm quite familiar with the school CCA program because I come from that school setting in various ways, right? I've been a school coach before, I've been a head before, I've been in the school leadership before, so I can see from different angles in terms of expectations of school coaches there. So perhaps if you all can share in terms of what you think are the typical questions you want to ask as coaches, what are they?
Coaches, maybe you all can try to unmute yourself. Yeah, I think it's easier if we can just talk it out. Yep.
Yeah. Anybody wants to share first? Hi, Richard.
Hey, hi, Vince.
Yeah, maybe you want to share. You've been in school's program for quite some time already.
No, but actually, frankly speaking, I've never done this before.
Right. Okay, yeah, that's true. I mean, it's not in the culture. It's not as common culture for a lot of school coaches. Okay, so you're not alone. You know, I've dealt with a lot of school coaches. They seldom go around asking, okay, can you give me feedback about how my coaching performance and so on. But it will be good if they know exactly what they want to do, try and improve, try and ask those pertinent questions through those kind of evaluation tools.
Yeah, the only feedback that normally will come from is the teacher who gave me the feedback rather than the student themselves.
Right. So even the students you don't ask.
No, not that we don't ask, but even you ask them, they shy away and they don't respond back to you. Maybe like what you say, it's a written note, maybe that will help rather than discussion and ask.
Yeah. And the other one is the alumni. I think the power of having a good alumni, that means your ex-girls who are in your program, now that they are out of the school program, they know they don't need to be frightened. They can speak up. They can be very open to you. You know, during the time when I was in your program, they will tell you, you know. So it might be a good opportunity to have a network of all students, your student athletes that can give you those kind of feedback.
Yeah, like I say, I mean, I've never done this. Maybe, I mean, it's a good start for me to work on it.
Yeah, good. Lee, I have you on my next one. And Jason, you want to share something and give a little bit inputs of where you are having to deal with? Or anybody else wants to share? Jason, can you hear me?
Hi, Vincent.
Hey, hi.
Okay, regarding this feedback about the alumni, most schools doesn't allow the ex-student to come back to schools. So that is out of question now. And then for student, they're okay with me, but the teachers are okay. But every time is the HOD. You always, you know, every year there's GBs and all, and you're out of picture again. Everything fine, but the HOD part, that's a main problem I have.
Right. Okay. Yeah. They tend to have a lot of variables involved. In other words, they are subjected to the fact that they've got to be very transparent and objective. You know, if somebody offers at a sort of a better price, then they need to make sure there is value for money. So all the more, you will need to know from their perspective, have you performed well enough to be value for money? What is it that you're looking out for so that you can better match that? You know, so that's the power of an evaluation. So all the more, you get feedback from your teacher in charge of that sport, and you also want to hand in a questionnaire for the head so that they can give you a quick evaluation of what they feel, you know, you can improve at. So that way, you know, you can deliver it or you can't deliver that program. So it's more transparent that way, yeah?
All right, thanks.
Lee and Jason, you want to share where you're coming at the school's program or what sort of evaluation you think will help you?
Hi, Vincent, can you hear me?
Yep, a little bit soft, but I can.
Yeah, okay. I think the examples that you quoted, right, they are not local in the local context. So in the local context, I think for schools, right, the stakeholders we are focusing on should be the players themselves and also the teachers and to a certain extent the parents lah. But for myself, I think personally, if we want this evaluation thing to be a success, right, it should be working hand in hand with the school. So we can as coaches we can do an evaluation, but the school has also got to work with us lah, give us a feedback, like what just now this guest said about the GB thing, right? If they don't want to work with you, they just want to change you, then there's no point lah. Evaluation is to go a long way. For the overseas programs, they are like contracted for 5 years, 10 years, this kind of thing. Yeah, it's totally different from Singapore local context. That's my view. Yeah.
Okay, the example that Wade gives is a collegiate program. In other words, it's a university level, our equivalent of a university program. And a lot of them are funded quite largely by whether the media and so on. So they've got a huge budget. So coaches are also evaluated in a similar fashion, but they have to deliver, but they need to know how can I improve myself such that I can match the expectation of that organization. In this case, the collegiate team, although it is not confined to that, but with that materials that they are doing, we need to know to what extent. Maybe at school level, you are right in the sense that there is only a limited touch point that you are able to do as coaches. You talk about athletes, you talk about, some of you all shared that alumni is a bit of an issue. But with the sort of touch point that you have, what can you get out of that to answer the sort of evaluation that you want? So those questions are key. That means if I give you free rein in terms of who you want to access, what would typically be the question that will help you improve? I'm sure, as an example, you want to know that you have delivered in terms of building up their competency. In other words, their sports skill. I'm not too sure what sports you are involved with, but you want to make sure that you have taught them well in terms of their foundational sports skill, or what is expected of them, at that age group or for that school, or to prepare them for the competition. So how do you know that they perceive that you have done a great job for them? So one way is to have some form of questionnaire that will allow them to pen their thoughts down. But the key is to get the truth, in a sense, honest and sincere feedback, and not a case of they dare not write something bad. They will tell you what you want to hear and so on. But you need to build that up. I know true in America it's a lot more extensive, and they're very open to perhaps giving feedback, and they will probably give a lot of sincere feedback, right? But at our own circle of influence that you have with different stakeholders, whether you're athletes, parents that are willing to do that, and of course your teachers who are in direct contact with you, you can get feedback from that and build on that. So that gives you a better picture of, now you know where you can improve on. Now you know, did you manage to achieve the outcomes that you want? But at the moment, it's iffy. You will never know unless you have some form of evaluation. Yeah, so that's what the session today is trying to touch on. What are potentially the sort of tools that you can use, and who do you want to ask the question so that you can better improve? Yeah. Somebody else? Toby, Esther, Gerald?
Yeah, I think Esther is outside, so it's not convenient for her to on her mic. But maybe we can speak to other coaches, maybe like Lee, Lin, or because Lee already provided his input. Maybe I just share with all of you. Yeah, so basically for these three questions, which stakeholders should you get the feedback from? So his response is, normally stakeholders are either those school leaders or teachers who are also active within the same sport. So they will comment on the coach's evaluation. Second question would be, which tools would you use to evaluate your program? So for him, the main thing is he gets active feedback from his athletes in terms of, like, for example, in terms of training and plans, and how they execute that plan. As for the third question, how different will evaluation criteria be different from A clubs and B national level? So his response is that because the contexts are very different, so the stakeholders are very different also, so likely the evaluation criteria will be all very different. Yeah.
So what would be the difference based on what you guys have learned? You know, obviously it's not going to be so extensive, and sort of stakeholders that you can deal with will be lesser. So who would you critically want the feedback from? Richard, I think you said even students will be a bit of a problem, and you got it more from the CCA teacher in charge, right?
Yeah, correct. But the only part that I get some feedback is when the coaches' days comes, then they will write their comments on a board, and then they all present it to us as coaches. Then from there, I do have a little bit of feedback. But I mean, like you have said, sometimes it's good to know, example, how much info or skill that we have taught them, and then whether they have learned those correctly or our instruction is clear or not. That is actually the concern.
Yeah. Because that helps you to lead up to your off season, and you know these are the gaps that you have to address. Then you are very clear. Based on the feedback, you are needing to improve in these areas.
Correct.
Perhaps it's communication and so on.
Yeah, okay. Esther has a written feedback here. She says that she thinks teachers don't really observe the training sessions all the time. So is it accurate to get feedback from them?
Okay,
posed as a
so
question,
very good question. Yeah, Esther, yeah. In fact, some CCA teachers are there mainly to mark the attendance and to look after the safety aspect, and a lot of them may not be familiar with the sport. So don't expect these people to give you feedback in terms of how do you do well in terms of coaching and so on. I don't think they will be in a position to give you that good evaluation. But they may be in a good position to say in terms of how you develop their social skills, their confidence and preparedness in terms of competition. Do they feel edgy? That perhaps they can. And you got to confine yourself to what possibly can they give that will help you in terms of your coaching journey. Yeah. So I do agree. Yeah, a lot of them may not even observe what's happening in terms of coaching because they are clueless in terms of what's happening. And they only look after the well-being and safety and so on. So maybe that aspect as well. Are they comfortable with the way you handle the kids and so on? That's good enough feedback as far as a CCA teacher in charge. But some CCA teachers in charge might be a lot more in tune because they're very experienced, have handled that sport for the longest time. They know how good coaches of the past have handled that. They might want to give you some input, or they are physical education teachers who are very much into sports and they can give you very good, useful feedback. I hope I answered that, Esther. Toby, perhaps you want to share? Or Gerald? If not, we will have to call them back in maybe in 3 minutes time, Chuan Yong.
Yeah, now the time is actually not 3:49. Yeah, maybe we give another 1 minute.
Yeah, okay.
To wrap
And maybe
up.
for this group,
Yeah.
one of you can round it up. Richard, would you want to round it up in terms of what key features, or you want Chuan Yong to do that? That means in terms of dealing with schools, the limitation and so on. Like what Jason has shared as well, you know, we can't have too many stakeholders. There are only a few that we can deal with, and it's true. In fact, I'm surprised you all have not mentioned that a lot of times you all are given that do not engage with perhaps the parents. Let that be the school teachers to do it. They play the part to communicate that. Nobody said that though.
Okay, another question from Esther actually. Yeah, because just now in your presentation, you mentioned the need for a questionnaire. So the question is, how long should the questionnaire be so the students don't find it a chore to complete?
Yep. I would say like anybody, you know, given a questionnaire, you don't want to take any more than 5 minutes to try and answer a questionnaire. More than that, you either have a very willing participant or athletes want to give you a full comprehensive feedback. Yes, by all means, do a 15 minutes one if you want to. But in most cases, you just need about 5 minutes for them to maybe do a check in terms of where they see your strengths, and it can be in a skill form, so they don't have to write too much except for the last couple of comments that you want them to give. So it should not take too long. Yeah, must choose the question very carefully. Yeah, and you got to be willing to take that in terms of getting feedback. And the reason why I pull out some of the quotes there is to try and emphasize, most coaches who ask for this evaluation are willing to hear all the negative ones as much as the positive ones. Okay, so we must be open to having that.
Okay,
Thanks for that,
thanks,
Esther.
Vincent.
That's another good one.
Yep. If there's nothing further, we will proceed to call the other participants back.
Yep.
Into the main group. Okay, so I have closed the rooms. The participants should be back within a minute. Okay, welcome back, everybody. Yeah, Vincent, shall we carry on the presentation?
Yep. Welcome back, everyone. I hope you all had a good discussion. We had our discussion with at the school level in terms of what they would see as evaluation that is distinctly different. And I don't know, if Chuan Leong, you want to share in terms of summary of what was discussed there, or you want me to?
Okay, sure. I will just give a quick summary. You can add on if there's anything missing. Yep. So for the MOE, for the school CCA coaches, so basically the main stakeholders that they work with are usually like the school's HODs, teachers in charge, and also their own athletes, because they are usually not allowed to in contact with the parents directly. So in terms of feedback wise, usually they will receive it through their HOD or the teacher in charge, and sometimes not very frequent also. So in our group, we also discuss about the possibility of having, as in if you are a school CCA coach, you could possibly think about designing a simple questionnaire for these players to fill in, possibly a short one, like not more than 5 minutes. Yep. So that could serve as a sense of a kind of benchmark as to how well you have coached in the past, season or something like that. But one thing also to note is that because as getting feedback is not really a norm in the local culture, so coaches, they have to be mentally prepared to receive critical feedback if they are going down to proactively sourcing for feedback from their relevant stakeholders. Is there anything to add?
Yeah, no, that was good, Chuan Leong. Yeah, I think the discussion was centered around that, and I think the extent of what you can gather out of a school program is kind of limited, because your stakeholder is very much limited to athletes, the school teacher, CCA teacher in charge, and in fact, somebody commented, I think you can see it from because it's in the chat group for everyone, that the CCA teacher may not be even observing, your coaching, so they may not give you feedback, but useful feedback. But I think that they will not be able to comment in terms of your coaching processes, but they will be able to see in the perspective of whether you develop their character, whether you develop their confidence, and so on outside of the sports field. Unless you have the opportunity to have a very experienced CCA teacher who is very much in the know of the sport and able to comment on the other aspect. But it is useful to get their feedback, while it's limited. Maybe we move on to Louis. Louis, your group have discussed in terms of club level coaching. You want to have a representative?
Actually, it was only me,
Share.
Kenny, and Jordan. But
All right.
so Kenny is a coach who coaches individuals, so he's too shy to share, so I'll share for him. So he coaches individuals for swimming. So it's very simple. So how he gets evaluation about or like feedback about how to improve, have improved methods on how to teach swimming skills to beginners, especially those with the fear of water. And who does he get it from? It's from his fellow other swimming coaches through a verbal, like a copy session for them. So this is pretty very, very simple because he's a private coach who coaches swimming. So I only had Kenny in my group. Just me and Kenny having our mini virtual copy session. But yeah, so that's Kenny .
Okay. Yep. Maybe I'll just throw it off before I pass it on to Yongju's group there, which looked at the national program there. In terms of club, what do we perceive as different from that of the school program? Anybody can share? A quick one. What do you think would be a difference when you compare that to a school's program? So when we say club, we talk about club that can be academy program. You can talk about it in terms of even the ones in the national programs, right? They are considered as a club, like CoachSG club, right? So in terms of evaluation, you want to make sure that you have a complete picture because you are running a program. It is not just your program, it's a program that is designed capture the essence of that particular organization or club. So it's different from that of a private coach there. So it'll be interesting to hear, are there differences? Do you want to get specific stakeholder to give that feedback? And I would think yes. You will need definitely to go directly to parents because they are the ones that will give you a good wider perspective, instead of perhaps a young athlete who may not be able to give you a more comprehensive sort of evaluation. I don't know whether you managed to get that out in that group there, but I'm hoping to hear a little bit more of that. Perhaps this group has got very few club coaches, so we are not able to. Or Mr. K, you have dealt with Active SG program. And you have dealt with a lot of parents and young athletes there. Who do you think it will be critical stakeholder that you want to have evaluation done? Did you hear me, Mr. K?
Mr. K, I've unmuted you already. You can speak.
Okay, yeah. I think yes, at the Active SG level, we talk to the parents because those kids are very young, and the ones who the parents can say more things about the whole program. Yeah. But the kids program, generally the coaches know what they are doing because they have been trained for coaching young kids. So usually we never have a problem from regarding the coaches. Yeah, the parents do not say about the coaches. Generally, the parents will say that it's a good program, they enjoyed it, and they say their kids enjoyed it. So at that level, very hard to get, or is it maybe it's not necessary to get very much serious feedback. The serious feedback should be done at the club level, and also more importantly at the national level where things are at stake.
Yep. Thank you, Mr. K. Okay, Yongju, maybe you give your perspective on the discussion on the national level.
I think Roger will share, will represent the group to share.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah, thanks, Roger.
You gotta unmute.
Yeah, I've unmuted Roger.
Roger,
already.
you gotta unmute. Yeah. Oh, he's still on. Okay.
It's
Yeah.
okay. Yeah, it's okay. already. Yeah.
I'm here. It's just that I couldn't speak. It looks like I've been arrowed. Okay. What evaluation for us tends to be after major games, where we have basically stakeholders in athletes, in some NSA and in Sport Singapore. What we need to evaluate are basically teamwork, individual performance. So what questions and the way we do it is generally individual questions, just a discussion, basically focusing on what was done well, what needs improve, what needs to be improved from the team, from the individual point of view, and a general overview of what could have been improved in the whole coaching program to better prepare. Some of the results will have more. I mean, this sort of discussion works well with the athletes, but the Sport Singapore and the NSA really just looking more for how the results were against the plan and this sort of thing, and hopefully they're as good as planned. So, yeah, that's the sort of overall evaluation we do, specifically after some things happen, after a major games, and then along those lines.
Roger, which sport are you in? Involved with? Lawn ball. Okay, cool. Yeah. So I'm just curious as well. In terms of coach evaluation, you mentioned you would have that discussion primarily with the athletes. Apart from the athletes, would you benefit from feedbacks from a couple of individuals, and who would the individuals be, you think?
Basically all of my athletes are in teams, and the whole team function, they all have to be rubbing off one another so that it makes an enormous amount of difference to whether they can perform or not. So sometimes you can talk to the whole team, but then there'll be a bit of reticence to come forward with some of the more personal stuff. And so it's good to do both things, to talk to the whole group, to talk to individuals. Just any way you can get the information and get them to feedback on the program and what they should have done better, could have done better, and how to do it better next time, that sort of stuff.
Yeah. Maybe I should also get from Yongju, because I'm going to get Yongju to share, because it's very much involved with badminton at many different angles, from management perspective as well as from the coaching perspective. So if you are in that situation where you want to get feedback, who critically would you want to get feedback from?
Of course, I mean, you get in contact with your players every day. So I think that would be the first group of, I would say, first group of stakeholders that you want to get feedback from. Then, of course, the other one would be from your fellow coaches. Because usually, I mean, during when I was in the national team, we work as a team, right? So your coaches can give you an extra pair of eyes to see where are your gaps, etc. And then, of course, we also work with the sports scientists from SSI. Yep. So that will be another group that we will be looking at as well. And then I think there's also one important, I won't call it stakeholders, I would say to provide feedback will be on self-reflection. I think that's very important as well. Yep. And of course, you have your management, you have your secretariat. Yep. So I think these are the various major stakeholders that you want to obtain feedback from. Yeah.
I'm surprised you have not mentioned high performance director or manager.
Yeah, I mean, they are part of the secretariat. So someone from
As
the
a whole.
secretariat who is, yeah, correct.
Oh.
I mean, the person who is in charge. Yeah.
Yep. Luis, you want to share? You too have been involved in the national program, so you would be a good icing on the cake, I would say. Yeah, to give your perspective. So you're in the sport of floorball, right?
Yeah. So we do season feedback from our players, and I also get it from our officials as well. And then, like Yongju mentioned, we work with SSI colleagues for players' physical training. But I also definitely I get feedback from my players on how we can improve the training sessions. I think not many coaches are receptive to, or even open to even asking their players, hey, how can this session be better? Because as coaches, I think self-reflection, as Yongju has mentioned, is as important as getting feedback for your whole entire training season. That is the only way that we can really improve and close the gaps with our shortfalls. And at the end of the day, it's for the team and how the team is able to improve together as one to build team cohesion. Like Roger mentioned, that team is really important because it sets the tone for the whole entire season and leading up to the competition as well. So I can't remember if I get any feedback from the NSA. I cannot remember. But yeah, because usually we are the ones giving feedback to the NSA about what we think we can improve on our part as coaches or officials for the team and for subsequent competitions. Yep.
Thanks for that, Luis.
Yeah. So maybe can I just add one more point, because I think Julian brought about this evaluation. So I mean, of course, the title of this workshop is post-season evaluation, but I mean, he did mention that it'd be good to do like every quarterly evaluation, small evaluation. Yeah, and then it slowly build up to your post-season evaluation. So I mean, this quarterly evaluation will make sure that you're on track in achieving your goal for that season. Yeah. So that's one thing that
Yep. So that quarterly evaluation is what we deem as a formative evaluation, leading up towards what you want. Yeah, excellent. Yeah. Thanks, Julian, for that. Okay, maybe a parting note. All right. I hope today's session touched about why the importance of having that evaluation at the end of a season. Okay. What is important is that you know what sort of questions you need to ask, who to direct that, and what sort of tools that you will need to use. Okay. I understand that in the local context here that it is still not a common thing to have an elaborate sort of evaluation, but it's an important evaluation. And another thing I want to impress upon is that a lot of time, elite level, senior level coaches tend to latch on to what is known as a coach mentor, somebody that they can rely on that would give them that feedback. So if you haven't got somebody like that, I would encourage you to look out for somebody within your sports field that can give you that sort of evaluation, an important evaluation. Yeah. So with that, I hope everyone managed to get something out of today's session. Thank you, and I'll give it back to Chuan Leong to finish off.
Okay, thanks Vincent, and thanks to all participants for the great session today. Of course, thanks to the co-facilitators also. We will now